Do you ever get someone who's in the middle of a divorce and they say, I won the lottery and I have no idea what to do? All I know is I don't want my spouse to get any of it.
Sure, it does happen. Unfortunately, that does happen. And I've had people that have contacted me after a major win, six weeks later or longer. Sometimes you find out that they use the time period to complete their separation from their spouse and or finalize the divorce. And that brings a whole other aspect to this. Now that brings in your state family law into play. So you would want to bring in an expert in that particular state. Like I had someone that contacted me from California, and they said that they were separated from their spouse, completely separated, even though they had kids. They never got together, they never had family dinners or nothing. They completely were their separate ways for 6 months. And the question was, well, if I won during that time period, is it mine or is it ours? And so again, state laws say as people are separated and they've declared themselves separated, that sometimes in the law, you can be a winner of a lottery and not share it with your spouse that you're not even divorced yet.
I would have to imagine at some point that ends up in some sort of settlement because the spouse could say, I've been through everything with that person and I'm going to go on social media and yell at the top of my lungs what they did and who they were if they don't give me something.
Well, that's where I'm going to ask them, hey, yes, you don't stay together. You're in separate households, obviously. But are you living in the household that the spouse owned? So in other words, you had multiple houses and you just haven't sold them yet. So there's some benefit by living in one of the houses, or are you living separately on your own? You also want to say, do you drop off your laundry and have your spouse do the laundry for you? Because, again, that's a tie. When you pick up the kids, do you have family dinners at the house together, or you just pick them up and go your separate ways? So all those little factors come into play in these types of situations. And that's why you want to get a good family law attorney that's a specialist in that area to give you some guidance before you take a position or before you disclose it. Because once it's disclosed, it's the toothpaste out of the tube.
Do you ever have somebody who wins and goes, hey, I have a family member who's about to get married and I want to set aside this amount of money for them, but do I now need to consider having them sign a prenuptial agreement?
Well, I mean, you're obviously, you have to tell them that that's what needs to be done, which means you have to disclose something to them. And there's been some cases where people have won lotteries and the family broke up. And when they broke up, part of the agreement was you can't tell anyone that grandpa won the lottery. That was part of their marital agreement. Well, spouse tells his or her parents, and, the parents are upset that their son or daughter got divorced. And they say it to someone, yeah, the SOB grandfather, won the lottery a long time ago. And, so they're the ones that disclose it, but they never signed it, but they heard it through someone that, over years, everything was fine. And all of a sudden, because of a divorce. So it's difficult. You can do all the non-disclosures you want, but again, it's like the toothpaste coming out of the tube. You can't put it back in once it's out. So it's, you just have to be careful in the process. I've had some clients where, we've talked to family members on the phone about this situation, say, here's the choice. We could either give you this money as part of the ticket, but you have to do you have to do a marital agreement with your spouse, or we have to give it to you after tax with our gift dollars. But if we give it to you with our gift dollars, the gift tax we pay is going to affect what we actually, give you. So it's going to be a lot less.
If a couple wins a couple $100 million, do you recommend a postnuptial agreement while they're already in the thing?
Well, I've had a couple of situations where people had one, and one of the things about money is it allows people to do things that they couldn't do before. Obviously, if there's a couple that's struggling, they may have to rely on each other just because that's the only way they can get through life. And now all of a sudden they win $1 billion, and the bottom line is $300 million net after all taxes. So they could split it up and say, okay, I'm taking 150, you're taking 150. We can go our separate ways. And I've had those situations where we've worked on divorce paperwork But again, I stepped in on behalf of them because they told me what's going on. I go, okay, listen, let's go through everything and let's divide things up. Who wants the house? What's the house worth? Let's make sure they get a little bit of cash. Let's do this. And when they start arguing about little things, I just say, hold on, that's noise. We don't need to be bringing noise into this conversation. Who gets a particular car is not that big of a deal. Just, get a new car, or something like that. So we have done that. And because I've done a post-marital agreement for them to separate, and then those agreements get incorporated with 2 attorneys that I bring in to handle the representation of each, the husband and the wife, so they can go their separate ways. And we can do it without a lot of fanfare. A couple of people have told me, man, you saved them a lot of anxiety, a lot of anger, and a lot of money, because think of what could happen if someone did get married and they went their separate ways, and the husband says, well, my money was used to buy the ticket. And the wife goes, well, I picked the numbers. So who should say, hey, the money's mine? So just split it up and go your separate ways and be comfortable with each other and just not be angry. Try to live your life at this point in time. Enjoy your life, basically.
I don't believe money buys your happiness, but if I won the lottery, I would certainly show up to my problems in a lot of style, because money does actually fix a lot of things. But there is also a hard part about, stepping into overnight wealth. For your clients, what is a common theme? What is the hardest part about winning millions of dollars?
Well, I think, again, what happens with clients is they have this belief and dream that they're going to win. So, I've gotten, last night, I think I got 10 calls in the middle of the night while I was sleeping, of people that were contacting me, most of which from the West Coast, because it wasn't 3:00 in the morning in the West Coast. But I get a lot of phone calls on my phone, just calling me saying, hey, I'm going to win tonight. And when I do, I'm calling you in the morning, that kind of thing. So people dream. And when they dream, they say, okay, when I win, because it's not if I win, it's when I win, because I know I'm going to win. And so when I win, I'm going to take this 1/3, it's going to be mine. I'm going to enjoy the 1/3. I'm going to take the other 1/3, and I'm going to give it to my friends and my relatives. And I'm going to take the other 1/3, and I'm going to give it to charity. And so, then we're there, we win. They find out that the $1 billion that they thought they were going to get is the $289 million. And that changes their whole perspective of life, going, hey, now it's only $289 million. If I take that and invest that, I can only get $13-14 million, basically tax-free. That's different than what I thought. So since I lost 2/3, I'm only going to give X number of dollars to family members, and I'm going to limit what I do to charities and who those charities are. So it's just, they change. People change when they have this money. There's an old adage that said, money makes people funny. And it's the same thing with the lottery. Everyone changes after they actually win. I have a client that, said, hey, I'm not going to do anything until my account goes over 100 million. So, what's the significance of 100 million? You can't enjoy your life. You can't buy things and do things and travel because you're not over 100 million. It's ridiculous. But people are funny that way. That's just how they are.
That's an interesting notion. Money makes people funny. I guess the real punchline here is the reporter who's been interviewing about the lottery. If he wins, that would be a real kicker, wouldn't it? Kurt, would you give me a discount? I'm completely kidding. You don't have to answer that question, but it gets into a real question here.
Sure.